This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. We have two episodes of Lower Decks to review today. The first two episodes of Season 4. So before we get into those, although we're excited to do it, we have a little bit of news to cover, not a lot. And the first is about, we've talked about this a little bit before, very short treks.
Well, we haven't talked about that name.
That's true. The name is new.
We've referred to these as animated shorts, promotional shorts, the things that were announced at Comic-Con as part of this celebration of the 50th anniversary of the animated series. So these are literally very short animated spots done in the style of Filmation back, in the 70s. They were now given the name Very Short Treks to play off short treks. However, there's some major differences with short treks and these.
Well, the biggest one besides the length is that these are not canon, which as soon as you watch one, you will know that.
Yeah, they actually won't be on Paramount Plus, which is another clue. They're not part of the Star Trek canon. They are promotional spots. So they'll be on StarTrek.com and they'll be on YouTube. So there's a total of 5 of them. The first one comes out on Star Trek Day, along with the Star Trek Day special.
Which is today, if you're listening.
Exactly. Happy Star Trek Day.
Happy Star Trek Day. We should have started with that. Happy Star Trek Day, everybody.
So the special goes out at midnight Pacific. The Very Short Trek episode goes out later in the morning. Maybe, check back at noon Pacific. It should be up by then, I think. So even though they're not canon, there's a lot of legacy characters and voice actors.
Voice actors as the characters you know them as. They're voicing their characters that are familiar to you. Jonathan Frakes, Doug Jones, we've talked about some of those. Ethan Peck, Gates McFadden, Celia Rose Gooding, Connor Trenier, back as Trip Tucker, which is fun, Bruce Horak, Noel Wells, and George Takei.
This is put together by this guy named Casper Kelly, who's had a small part in Star Trek before he worked on the short treks, The Trouble with Edward. He made the little weird cereal commercial. He's mostly known for his work on Adult Swim, and it's very edgy stuff. But Aaron Watke actually wrote one of these. Someone else wrote one of the other ones. But it's mostly this guy's Casper's vision. He also wrote a comic book, which comes out on Star Trek Day digitally for free. That's tied into these as well.
And they'll have physical copies at New York Comic Con, I think they said.
Yeah, so maybe you can get one if you go.
Yeah.
On a side note, for New York Comic Con, because there's no Star Trek Day this year event like they've done previously, I expect they will try to do some stuff at Comic Con, especially if the strikes are over by then. So like a disco panel and stuff like that. So it'll probably be a big event.
Very dependent on the strikes.
Yeah, I'm just hoping by October. Things are getting so bad now that
I know
there's pressure on all sides to, wrap that up. But, we're getting sidetracked. So back to Very Short Treks. Both of us have had a chance in advance to see the first one, which comes out on Star Trek Day. And it's called Skin a Cat. What'd you think?
So my overall, it's so funny because to me, it reminded me a lot of why I stopped watching Saturday Night Live, which is that things would start out funny and great. And then about halfway through, I would be like, okay, I got it. But it's still going. And so I thought this made me laugh out loud at the beginning. And halfway through, I was done and it was still going.
Yeah, I'd say that's an accurate thing. I mean, I like it. I like the style. I like the humor, but it is kind of a joke that goes on. And in a way, that's kind of Casper's style itself. If you've seen the thing that kind of got him first noticed is this Adult Swim thing called Too Many Cooks. And it's like this fake opening sequence of a bad 90s sitcom. And it's just this weird sequence that just introduces hundreds of characters for one show. And it's funny, but it like literally goes on too long. That's the joke. So in a way, I feel like Casper knows that he's taking it too long. It's kind of like a Family Guy does the same thing where you take a joke too far almost.
Well, it's also that danger with some comedy where if you parody something well enough, you become as annoying as the thing you're making fun of because now you're just doing it. So, but in this case, I have to say, like, I thought the animation style was great. They nailed it. They made it look great. Having Ethan Peck there was very fun.
Right. So this is set on the original series bridge. Peck is Spock. For Kirk, they brought in Pete Holmes, who I'm a fan of in general. I love, like his Batman stuff and so many things he's done is very funny. I thought he did a good job, actually.
Well, I didn't even but it didn't look the way Kirk looked in the show. So I was like, is that supposed to be Kirk? Like, I wasn't even sure it was Kirk. I was like, it's a captain. But he doesn't sound like Kirk, and he doesn't look like Kirk. He doesn't look like Kirk in the Filmation show. So, and he doesn't act like Kirk. So, whatever. But it did start out funny, and I did laugh out loud at the absurdist funny, like the cat, and then the fish, and then the knickers. That made me laugh out loud for sure.
Right. So
that's when
we're spoiling
it
a
up
bit.
a notch.
But yeah, so these are worth checking out. They're worth every penny you're going to pay for them when you watch them on StarTrek.com for free. And they're not canon. Yeah, I think some people will be bent out of shape over, how edgy these things are. But once you realize they're not supposed to be like short treks part of canon, I think you could just accept them for what they are, which is silly promotional spots. And it's a bit more Star Trek content for 2023,
Yeah, they're goofy, they're fun, they're short. So, yeah. And if you don't like it, then you're done and you move on.
The one that Aaron wrote, I'm intrigued about. It's called Holograms All the Way Down. I think he's hinted that it's going to have a lot of legacy. I think he tried to cram as much, knowing Aaron, because he's such a nerd. It's going to be just wall to wall, over the top, almost a parody of himself of the Star Trek references that he likes to put into his episodes.
And I think his is the one with Trip Tucker. Did I hear that or no?
I think
make that up in my head?
I think it's got as many as he could cram in there. So I don't know who's in there, but I think more than one, like maybe more than 5, like, so, which is hard to do.
Unless you're Aaron.
Yeah.
He's done it before. He'll do it again, and he's good at it. So, so we'll see.
Being that Star Trek Day, you'll want to check out the special that's hosted by
Jerry O'Connell.
We'll have that on our site. It's going to be everywhere. They're going to be airing this on TV channels. I haven't seen it, but my sense is it's not a replacement for Star Trek Day. They're not going to use this for big announcements. It's just kind of a celebration of Star Trek. I think it's like a half an hour. If you're a hardcore fan looking for reveal something big to me, that's not what this thing is. It's almost like a promotion for Star Trek as a notion. Right.
You're not going to see scenes from upcoming anything, I don't think.
Well, they're going to.
You haven't seen something. Yet.
There's going to be something from Discovery. They've already. But it's probably going to be stuff we've seen from the trailer and the clip. They've released a surprising amount of season 5 Discovery stuff. There's going to be a sneak peek of Lower Decks. We probably haven't seen that, right? Because there'll probably be a little, just some stuff from the next 8 episodes.
Right. Well, I'm going to watch
for sure.
Yeah.
That's it for Star Trek Day stuff. A quick update on Strange New Worlds. The Nielsen ratings for the last week of the show came out, and it showed up on the chart again for the top 10 streaming original shows. So, just in general, Strange New Worlds did very well at least from the Nielsen metrics.
Especially the musical. Just saying.
I think their 2 episodes got up to number 7. The finale was at or the week of the finale, because it really counts view. They don't really know what you're watching. They just know you're watching Strange New Worlds. So you could have been watching, season 1. They don't really care. But
it was me watching the musical and the crossover over and over and over.
But so the finale week came in at number 10. The previous week with the musical came in at number 7.
Right.
I think it's good news for Star Trek, because it and Picard and, one episode of one of those Taylor Sheridan shows. I suspect the new Zoe Saldana Taylor Sheridan show will show up on this thing but there's so much content on Paramount Plus that hasn't shown up on this thing. So the suits are probably paying attention to this stuff.
As they're trying to figure out what the hell to do about everything else.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, let's move on to Star Trek Picard because season 3 is out. DVD, Blu-ray, and Steelbook, right?
Yeah, and in 2 flavors, you could buy what's called the final season, or you could buy the entire series, which includes the final season. And there's a lot of special features. We got an exclusive clip of one of them, which you can see on the site. Yeah, there's good special features in this thing. There's some fun Easter eggs hidden in the Blu-ray set. Matt's working on his full review, which I think will go up on Friday, which is today from your point of view. So you'll want to check that out. There was one of those mini fan controversies that erupted on Twitter that then kind of turned into a few articles. So we ended up having to write about it as well.
Well, because people thought there was an unfinished shot on it, but that is not actually the case. Correct?
Yes. So, I mean, this is really in the weeds. And I'm shocked how many people, I would have never spotted this. So in episode 10, the season finale, there's an early shot of the USS Enterprise. It lasts just a few seconds. And some people who watched the show on Paramount Plus noticed that there's a flyby shot that looked different than what they saw. And
it had a nebula.
Right. I mean, I would have never noticed that.
They're like, where's my nebula? My nebula is gone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, good for, that's good eagle eye spotting. I'm not making fun of them. I'm impressed that they noticed.
But, Matt sort of remembered, oh, wait, but this actually happened in April. And so there were 2 versions of the shot. One, because the show was also on Amazon Prime internationally. And there was it's an alternate shot. It's not a bad shot. It's just slightly different. And apparently for the Blu-rays, I don't know why, this alternate shot that was in the international version shown on Prime Video. And our sources are saying it was kind of a last minute change that ended up on Paramount, but didn't end up on Prime. But it's not like this glaring temp shot error that some people have made it out to be. It's just a tiny little alternate shot. And that's all it is.
But it got people talking. People were buzzing.
People were buzzing because, got to talk about something.
No, and look, it is Star Trek fans notice things. You got to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to belittle. I'm impressed that people notice this stuff. But then to kind of get bent out of shape about it.
Right, it's the getting mad about it part.
It's like, wow, really? Anyway, good set. But if you want to wait, next month they're putting out this ridiculously big box set of Picard, all of Next Gen, all of Picard, and all sorts of just stuff like playing cards and coasters, and in this big box that costs, I forget, like $200 or something.
I was going to say $1 million. I'll take the coasters, please.
Okay, they sent me the coasters I got a box shaped like a Borg cube as a promotional thing, which we put up on our Twitter, so we can link to that in the show notes. And that included the coasters. So if you want them, you can have them.
Yeah, I want them.
All right, they're yours.
Awesome. We also have up on the site a preview of this new book that is out now, right?
Came out on Tuesday.
Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the making of the classic film. So, Tony, did you do the interview with the authors?
Yeah.
The Tenutos? So, but they are known for very meticulous research, and they spent a lot of time digging into the Nicholas Meyer paper collection at the University of Iowa. They made good use of it. And these guys, they've been writing about Star Trek for a long, long, long time. So I'm looking forward to reading this one.
There's archive interviews, but there's also new interviews, including interviews with Meyer. There's a lot of rare and first time, photography and stuff. So it's a coffee table book. It's full color. It's about a 1 foot square. Titan has been doing great stuff in the last few years. My other friend, Jeff Bond, wrote the Star Trek: The Motion Picture book, which came out last year, the year before. Same kind of deal. So if you saw that, this is basically just as good. It's just for a different movie.
Yep. We have a review coming out soon from Joe, who writes comic reviews for our site.
Yes.
So you can look forward to that.
And other things. Joe's going to work on, we're going to do some theory articles like we did during Picard when we were doing
fun.
Who's the Face theory thing. So we're going to work.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to do Who's the Mystery Threat theory things for Lower Decks.
All right, go Joe.
That's pretty much it for the news, but I think that's good because we have 2 episodes of Star Trek to deal with.
Yeah.
Let's start off with talking about episode 401.
All right, I think it's time for us to review the very first episode of season 4 of Lower Decks. Are you ready?
Totally.
So we are going to talk about Twovix. In case you didn't notice, it's a Voyager-related episode.
It says spelled differently.
Yes. So that people they won't get confused. You won't have to go to Memory Alpha to go which one was which. This one's spelled Twovix with the TWO. The episode was written by Mike McMahon. It was directed by Jason Zarek and Barry J. Kelly, who you spoke to last week.
Yeah. So it's all. I think Mike has written the season premiere for every season, so that makes sense.
Well, he's very good at it.
There's some, and you can see some similarities and some callbacks to his other previous season premieres in this. Not only the kind of huge amount of Easter eggs, he likes to do that, but just little things, like the callback to how if something like this is happening, one of us is going to end up covered in slime.
Right.
We've already kind of started at a high level. This episode was written for you.
It was.
So you loved it.
I felt like it was written for me. I like the expression on my face while I was watching was like a little kid who's waiting for their ice cream cone. Like I was just so excited. And just even the beauty shots of Voyager, like everything. I loved it. Yes. Episode for me.
I'm picturing the Treehouse of Horror where Homer's in hell at the machine that feeds him donuts. And that's you. It's like more Voyager references are being fed into you, and you're like, more.
Love it. Can't get enough. Yeah.
I mean, I loved it too. The Voyager references, I think, were great. But, for me, it was funny, and it had a lot of heart and some really good character stuff. And there were some issues I had with the season 3. And I think you and I shared this, the season 3 finale, where things were buttoned up a little bit too neatly. Mm-hmm. With the Mariner and Boimler storyline, where Mariner's like, she's like back, just everything's fine.
Great.
So the Mariner, Boimler, who are the heart of the show, obviously, and their story in this episode was quite tense, and there were some big issues going on with them as characters, and it was all sort of looking back on that season finale and Boimler's issues with guilt and stuff. So I'm glad they picked up on that storyline instead of just moving on entirely.
I thought there was great character stuff in this. And also, I think in addition to being about Voyager and the very famous moral debate, which they just put such a good spin on, it was also very much about fandom.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the curator...
voiced by Andy Richter, which was great.
Very cool. Yeah, for sure. He was kind of a stand-in for fandom. Don't touch that. Right. He used a phrase that's very... because, collectors will call something screen used to mean real. And he would say things like that. So he was very much a proxy for fandom and a bit of the over obsessiveness about keeping things pure and clean, but he had his own little arc where he kind of came to accept the changes and embrace and adding to his to the museum exhibit at the end, which I thought was very
which is sweet. Adding I hate to use these expressions, but adding new Trek to old Trek. Right. Because at the end, we're already at the end of the episode. Okay, we're done. But where they added Rutherford and Boimler to the exhibit. So if that's not a stand-in, it's telling you these things can all live together.
Yeah, they added a little bit of canon to Voyager story, as Lower Decks itself just added. Now we know that this ship ends up at the museum because they. In 20 years later, but it had to start somewhere, or it went to Earth. They landed it, and then it's going to go to a space. It's
going to orbit
space station
or something. Yeah,
and then they're going to take it to Geordi's museum,
the Fleet Museum.
And he was shown to be a little bit like when Mariner was calling him out. There was, I think that was another kind of meta moment. Because he added the holodeck projectors to the corridors.
The hollow emitters, yeah.
Yeah, and she's like, what's that? That's not canon, essentially, is what she was saying. That's not canon. And he's saying, well, it's and
made for a better experience. Yeah.
So, backing up, that's when they were all running away from. If you were to just pick 3 random villains or not villains, but people to turn into villains, I thought those were 3 great choices, which was Chaotica, the clown, the Michael
McKean clown.
Right. And then Michael Sullivan.
Yeah. Well, I loved, because as soon as I saw them, I went, wait, the clown wasn't a holodeck character. And then 5 minutes later, Marina goes, the clown isn't a holodeck character. And then she likes Michael Sullivan because he's kissing her and he's all cute and stuff.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I like this guy.
Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you? So I thought once things started going with Voyager, I'm like, oh, well, we're going to see the Doctor or Neelix or something, right? We're going to get a cameo because that's what they do on this show. But they didn't. And
well, if you don't consider the macrovirus a cameo.
Fair enough. And not only that, just so many other little things. Robot versions of the salamanders.
Neelix's cheese.
There were literal stand-ins. There were mannequins. There was a 7 mannequin, a Neelix mannequin, a Tuvok Janeway mannequin. So they all had mannequins. But I'm glad because the ship itself was a cameo. And any cameo, if they brought in Picardo, which would have been great, but it would be too much about bringing in Picardo, unless it was for 3 seconds, which might have been kind of funny. If they turned on the EMH and then
turned them off right immediately.
Right.
I mean, I assume they couldn't do it for money reasons and probably not worth it. But imagine if Michael McKean had come back to voice the clown and Martin Rayner to do Chaotica. That would have been fun.
Yeah, it was unnecessary for those.
Yeah, it was, but it would have been fun. But I guess if I was looking where to spend my money, maybe that's not where I'd spend it.
I mean, they did bring back the people. There's the Klingons at the end were voiced by the same people. Yep. They have so many guest stars. In fact, we haven't talked about her at all. T'Lyn is technically a guest star. And you had Paul Scheer, Carl Tart, Paul F. Tompkins. And so they have their big kind of stock of guest stars, Nolan North, obviously. So maybe there's just not room to bring in more than that. Yeah. Perhaps.
No, I get it. And Andy Richter was kind of a big get in my book.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to have one guest star, then that's the new character. I don't know. I mean, who voiced it? I'm pretty sure it was Paul Scheer who voiced Tillips. What was great about Tillips was Tillips had agency, was a real character and a great blend, like Twovix, the character, of the 2 characters, I thought. Yeah. Kind of went evil, but for good reason.
Well, went evil after reading Janeway's solution. I love all of that. I'll just, for the captain, and she's like, I'm just going to find out what Captain Janeway did, and then we'll do the same thing, because she doesn't know. And then she's like, I hope Tillips doesn't read this, and then, uh-oh. But I love, because I'm one of those people who thinks Janeway was right 100%. I love those debates. They're constantly happening still all these years later on social media. So I personally am on the Janeway is right bandwagon. But what they did was they escalated this. They're like, okay, so first created something with agency, then created something with a bad plan that was trying to do bad things to everybody, and then merging everybody, and then one big giant human meatball at the end, at which point your moral decision is now easy.
Well, yeah, even Tendi, who was immediately, obviously, against any straight up murdering of people,
right?
Which the word murder was used quite a bit in this episode. Because, of course, the other side of it was T'Lyn, who had her own little arc in this episode. But T'Lyn immediately, her first was to not call Tillips a person, but an organism.
Right. Don't get to know him. That was the general idea.
Right. Don't give it a name.
Right.
Kind of like, someone who lives on a farm, tells their kids, don't give them names.
Don't give the piglets names.
So let's talk a little bit about T'Lyn, introducing T'Lyn as a character, something we talked about last week with Barry, Kelly, and I agree. She adds exactly 10% more humor to the show.
Yes, I would agree. She had great lines and great moments. And I like that she and Tendi had to learn from each other, because Tendi's trying to prove like friendship is important and T'Lyn is disregarding all of this, and then does see why it's important and does learn to appreciate Tendi. But also just her reaction to everything, because Tendi's the polar opposite, jumping around with so much energy, and then this very dry. I loved when she said, "This ship is outdated and smells like Borg."
It probably does.
Well, and we know Vulcans have a highly developed sense of smell.
Yeah, did she not have her nose plugs in?
Maybe Borg, smell penetrates.
What does it say about Tendi that she just decided T'Lyn is her best friend suddenly? Because, there's nothing, she's not getting anything back. At the end, she kind of did, even though T'Lyn still said, "You're taking away the wrong lesson from this," when she gets the hug. Because I think T'Lyn's going to be on a long path. But at least she was, the key turn for T'Lyn is she admitted she's only there until she could get her old job back.
Right.
Because I thought when T'Lyn joined the crew, she's going to be like, "Oh, thank God. Those Vulcans were the worst. They were driving me crazy." But it kind of makes more sense that she feels rejected by them.
Right. And let's face it, when she was on that ship, she wasn't really doing anything that crazy when they kept accusing her of it.
It's all subtle nuances with the Vulcans, I guess. I certainly hope this season we see those Vulcans again. We get to see her progression and how she deals with her former captain. I bet eventually she gets the chance to join them again, and she decides not to.
Well, she'll try it and not like it.
Because if you notice, she was called a provisional ensign, and then she was promoted to a provisional.
Yeah, that was fast.
Lieutenant, but they're using that kind of weird pin that they made for the Maquis. So I guess this is for guest officers.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think eventually she'll become a member of Starfleet, but she's technically not Starfleet.
Right.
So who was your favorite hybrid? I mean, of the other ones, like Tillips was like a full character, but then they had some kind of crazy combinations as well.
I know they were all so fast though, and then soon enough it was everybody. But why did you have? I didn't have a favorite, but did you have a favorite?
Well, I like the one of Steve Stevens and Matt the Whale.
That one didn't. Not my best work, as they. That one didn't go so well. No, and I actually thought it was genuinely scary when T'Lyn and Tendi are hanging out, and then all of a sudden, like, people start getting dragged out, and they're getting made into combinations. Like, that was creepy.
Yeah, it was. So the Miglamo Captain Freeman one was fun. I was surprised that character then didn't have another thing to say for the rest of the episode, though, because you'd think she seemed very cool.
Yeah, she was doing a little bit of bossing around later,
I guess. Tillips was driving the show, and you had Shax combined with the Trill
that's who I thought. I was like, I think it's that Trill, but I wasn't sure.
It's the Trill that Rutherford went on a date on in like the first season, and and then I think it just became the Blob,
right?
Because when T'Lyn, which I liked, like T'Lyn was sure she was doing the right thing, but she kind of screwed up. Right. So T'Lyn, like many other Vulcans, is not perfect.
Right.
Smart, but makes mistakes, which is good.
No one needed that combination with Tendi.
Yeah, but T'Lyn's like, oh, these Starfleet systems, no problem.
Well, the smart thing was definitely like at least, getting everybody the hell out of there. But it was just that they all ended up
denying access to the transporter. Yeah. Was key. It was combining them all into the one meat blob that was the bit of a mistake.
With the big tongue.
Oh, the other one was Lundy and the bartender, which I thought was funny and random.
But just deciding who was going to do it. Oh, it was like menacing and hilarious at the same time, which is a challenging combination.
I mean, it could have been fun for him to see, like go mad scientist and like, ooh, what would be, like creating cocktails? Like, what if we tried 3 people, and see what we get?
Well, then they found out what happened when they tried everybody. But yeah, I mean, but that was a great escalation of the Twovix debate because it did, to me, it shows people like, well, there's a line somewhere right? Like, okay, so
Right.
maybe some people go, well, you can't kill Twovix because, I mean, the original Twovix, because it's a new creature. Okay, so what happens when someone's doing it to everybody? Okay, what happens when everybody, like, it's just the best what if I've ever seen.
I mean, they kind of come down hard on Janeway, but then they're like, Janeway was hardcore and she was in the Delta Quadrant and she didn't have any other choices. Freeman was right. It's like, we're not in the Delta Quadrant. We don't have to decide now. We could, ask the experts, bring them to Earth.
Right. No, and
unfortunately,
I was just gonna say,
there was not enough time.
As Ransom says, it's Voyager. Shit got freaky. Like, I love the acknowledgement that all this really weird stuff happened on Voyager.
Yeah. I think this was a good episode for Ransom, because Boimler's arc was he didn't want to take the promotion from Ransom. Ransom was kind of getting pissed at him for his attitude. I think he's showing what a good commander he is, especially how he treated Mariner. I think he was good last season with Mariner, and his whole thing of, I'm not going to do what other commanders have done, because she doesn't want the promotion. Because this is obviously not, I mean, we saw her promoted once before, and she said it's happened before. So she has a series of promotions and demotions in her past. And he's like, I'm going to be the one that breaks through. I'm going to be the commander who gets you to not get immediately demoted.
And then he still makes it about how great he is. And then admires his own reflection in the pip.
Yes. And then starts doing crunches or pull-ups.
Which gets her to leave, which I assume was the objective.
But Ransom could have easily devolved into a one-note meathead character, and he hasn't. He's smart. I love to see, there was just a little tiny thing with him and Kayshawn where he spoke a little Temerian.
Yes. And he's like, I pay attention.
Yeah. He's multicultural, And I think we're going to see more of this. I think they're setting something up, because obviously what he's saying is, I'm not going to let you get demoted. So he's going to obviously be keeping his eye on her.
Yeah.
Like he did last season.
Well, that relationship is fun, the two of them. There's always one of them who doesn't want to have anything to do with the other one, and it has switched back and forth.
What was your favorite Voyager gag of all the Voyager gags?
Oh my God, I was so trying to decide which I liked the best, because there were so many. It's very hard. Like, I was probably somewhere between the cheese, because it was such a nice callback, and the Michael Sullivan.
I like the robot salamander, because the robot salamander kind of got around, right? It was started in his exhibit, then it got Borgified.
Yes, it did get Borgified.
It took command of the ship, actually.
It did. It was sitting in the chair very happily.
And it would issue commands using its tongue, his little robot
and
tongue.
And it was sending them, it was going to Borg space. That's where it wanted to go find some more Borgs.
Well, that's what Borgs do. Yeah. By the way, whoever put this museum together really left some dangerous stuff. I mean, they should have done another pass. There was nanobots, Borg nanobots, and macrovirus. Yes. What else is hiding in that ship
well, that
somewhere?
was part of the point, too, because he was being so fussy and meticulous, but he'd actually completely screwed it up.
So getting back to the character, so Boimler eventually broke through and was excited about his promotion once he got through his issue with Mariner and his little loss of confidence from last season. And Tendy's excited about getting her promotion. Mariner's not, but then we end with, I thought it was weird how they ended with Rutherford not being promoted, but we're going to talk about that in the next episode, because they released 2 in the same day.
Right. And he's like, they don't give engineers promotions for breaking things. That's what he said.
Oh, but he got an exhibit. He would know that, he broke it for good reason. Yes. I mean, that was funny when Boimler goes into astrometrics. I mean, there's so many great sets they remade from the Voyager. And they're all up on the wall, slimed on the wall. And he grabs Rutherford. He's like, I only need an engineer. And he leaves Ransom and Kayshawn stuck to the wall. They were pissed. But he's like, I need you to break the ship. And he did. Right. So that was good with the cheese.
With Neelix's cheese.
Well, there's a detail, like, the curator mentioned, yes, we have an exhibit of the cheese, which means they had a sample of the cheese. Right. So the solution to both of the problems were subtly inserted early, because Tendy's solution was what looked like a throwaway joke when Tillips was in sick bay saying, I love being alive.
Yeah.
It was kind of the joke. But he also took a tricorder and fixed it, right? And it was that tricorder later that could detect personality traits.
Right. He improved the scanning on the tricorder.
Yeah. That joke was enough on its own.
Well, because it was right, like Tandy says, Tillips didn't ask to be created, and then 1 second later, he's like, "I love being alive."
Yeah, because we're all going, we know where this is headed.
Yeah, we know there's no, yeah.
That shows you, again, Mike is very careful about his episodes and knows how to plant things and then pick up on them later.
Right, it's not just a string of jokes. It's just not. Everything is rich and layered and goes back to where you started.
There's something we haven't talked about much, but there was another Wage Dooge reference in this, and that gets into the season arc.
Right.
Because we, again, return to the Klingon bird of prey from Wage Dooge, and we saw 2 of the characters, kind of the lower decks characters, and the captain, who used to be lower decks, but is now captain of the ship. I think what's interesting is there was no connection. Right. So this is just happening somewhere else. So eventually they're going to get connected. But after we finish the next episode, which had another one of these little sidebars, as it were, maybe we could talk about some of our guesses as to what's going on with that overarching story. But I liked how, yes, there, as Barry said, there's more of an overarching story, but it's not, it's kind of, I guess, being done in these little sidebars.
Well, that's how I want it done. So that made me happy because I was like, it's just a little bit. And then I assume it'll build up and then the pieces will come together. I like that it was very Star Trek the Motion Picture-ish in mood and tone when that happened. And I love that he ceased that nervous honing because of the... And spear is a coward's weapon. All that stuff was great. So it's like even as they're still giving you like the giant story and then the little mini story and then the jokes. Yeah,
no, that was all. Yeah, it was great Klingon stuff. They're fighting and they stop and like, you want to go eat some eyeballs? Yeah. It's all and
having to transcribe tedious battle tales.
Yeah, life on board a Klingon ship. That's what it's like.
What it is.
I've got nothing else. I thought everything was great. Perfect restart on the characters. We can now sense arcs coming for these promoted characters, but the show is as good as it was, if not better. I think because there were times that season 3 dragged a little bit. I'm now feeling even more excited about season 4.
I was completely invigorated by this one, not just because it was Voyager, but because the pace was so good. There was so much going on all the time, and it all tied together. All right, so let's turn our attention to episode 2 of season 4 with an excellent Star Trek-y title, I Have No Bones, Yet I Must Flee.
Very TOS, but also certainly, I think, as you noted, tied to Harlan Ellison.
Yeah, if you have not read I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, you should. It's a weird, creepy, terrifying story. So what's your big picture view of this episode?
Well, firstly, I want to say, that even though I'm glad they released 2 episodes on one day and a lot of people watch them back to back, I did. Like Strange New Worlds, you shouldn't watch the show that way because it's episodic and it forces comparison. So I'm going to use a comparison when I shouldn't because it's unfair. I liked it very much, but I like the opening one better. But watching them back to back kind of, because you start seeing some of the structural things that they do with these shows, and we'll talk more about that later. There's like little writing tricks they use, and it becomes more apparent when you're watching them back to back. But no, I very much liked it. It's it's certainly less reliant on canon connections and a better, I feel, character story. So I think it's a good, solid, funny, kooky episode of Lower Decks. I just liked the first one a little bit better.
Yeah, so I didn't watch them back to back. I watched the first one, and then a few days later, I watched the second one. And I felt the same way. Look, I'm a huge Voyager fan, so of course that first one just hit all the right notes for me. I liked this one. I thought it was good. It wasn't as good, but it had a lot of good stuff in it, and I thought it really did focus on the characters and I think tell us important things about them, and was very true to who they are and sort of what some of their weaknesses are.
At my first viewing, I was annoyed at the character of Mariner, who seemed to have regress, because Mariner's constantly evolving and learning and getting better, but she like just completely regressed in this episode. But then I realized that's kind of the point. You know, she was being extra Mariner on purpose because of her misunderstanding or miscommunication
and her history.
Right. Because I wanted, I mean, the whole point of the season, or maybe not the point, but so much of this season is about how they've been promoted, and which means these characters are learning and growing and evolving. But in a way, this episode was trying to hit home. Yes, they are now all lieutenants, especially by the end. But that doesn't mean they're not lower decks. They're still lower decks. They're still underdogs. I mean, the Boimler story was great just to show how, he's the Rodney Dangerfield of the ship. It's just things never work out for him. He gets no respect, although it did work out in the end. But becoming a lieutenant wasn't exactly this great moment for him, at least from his housing point of view.
Right. So, no, and I think the whole episode, in terms of our characters, was really about how three of them primarily get in their own way, which is Rutherford, Mariner, and Boimler. Their problems were all sort of caused by themselves.
They're self-sabotagers in their own ways, for sure.
Like, and Tendi had to take charge for Rutherford. She had to step up and be like, listen. First, she's bossing him. She ordered him around. But I love that he's going, oh, you can't get a promotion because it's so complicated. And she's like, hey, can he have a promotion? Sure. Pip me. And there you go.
I very much, I preferred that storyline. First of all, Eugene doesn't get enough to do on the show, I've always felt.
Yeah.
And he's very funny. And the whole thing from the beginning, it was testing his eternal optimism, the sunny, like at that one time where he goes, I want to get back to where we could compliment people behind their backs.
Yes, they want to praise people behind their backs.
He's so, like, at the beginning, he's like, well, I'll just get a promotion, no problem. Today, he failed to mention an important thing, but his plan of the make a tiny incremental improvement was funny because in the end, they reminded us he's had some major engineering accomplishments that have saved the day multiple times.
Yes.
And he's been offered promotions for many of these in the past. So, his whole side quest of if I could get one Pico Cochrane out of this or that. There was so much technobabble in his storyline. I loved that. And he's got a nemesis now.
He does. Livik. He's so mad at him.
But now Livik is mad at him and Tendi. I'm wondering if that's going to be a thing.
I know. I love that he threw Tendi in there, too.
I hope we see Livik again. I don't want to see Gary again.
The only thing I liked about Gary was that it was the guy from Abbott Elementary doing the voice.
Sure.
Which I watch Abbott Elementary and I love it. But he was not super needed, I got to say. Like, they needed someone to react to what was going on. But it was so obvious that was the only reason he was there.
He was like a bad copy of Boimler, of season 1 Boimler, to be a reaction for her. Why? Why not bring someone we know?
I mean, they needed someone who would be scared and was green and new. So, but still. But they did have Moopsie, so there's that.
No notes on Moopsie. Moopsie was perfect.
Moopsie had a little bit of Nibbler from Futurama vibe, because when the first episode with Nibbler devours animals, like giant things. Like they put Nibbler in the cargo hold with all these animals, and Nibbler eats all I think everything.
Right.
So, but Moopsie saying Moopsie was excellent.
Nibbler isn't terrifying when it does it. Nibbler's still cute even when devouring.
Yes.
Whereas Moopsie gets briefly terrifying. Yes. and the drinking of the bones is even worse than just eating something. So yeah, I loved when Moopsie was out and the Pytherian swamp gobblers were terrified. Everyone was terrified. And Mariner's like, what? He's adorable.
Right, but the gobblers just gobble. Moopsie drinks your bones.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe that is the connection to the Harlan Ellison story. But anyway. But yeah. And Moopsie, I loved when I don't know what gender Moopsie is, if Moopsie has a gender, but Moopsie flinging itself at the doors also so cheerfully and menacingly was perfect.
Yeah, I don't think Moopsie feels pain in any way or possibly enjoys it. You know, one of the things that for this storyline, it was kind of predictable. Like the Mariner thing was clearly a miscommunication from the beginning. So I never bought that Ransom was out to get her. And you know, when you showed up on the station, it was clear that the humans were behind releasing Moopsie. You could see the poster. They were Shawshanking out of their cell because it was upside down from the beginning. And just there was a lot of this. And this is, you know, one of the issues of watching them back to back is the thing of where you have all this character conflict and then one of the characters says, well, this is what I was thinking. And then it was like, well, no, actually it's this. And then all the character conflict goes away because of this miscommunication, which is kind of like Boimler in episode 1 and Mariner had a very similar thing. And so it's almost like using the exact same structure, which again is why I shouldn't have watched them back to back. Because it's like, oh, you just did the same exact writing trick, 20 minutes ago. And it's maybe better if I didn't do that. So that's unfair of me, perhaps. But this show does do that a lot, for sure, which is a standard sitcom thing. That's kind of how sitcoms work, to be honest, is these kind of character conflicts creating humor through miscommunication.
But I did like that where the miscommunication happened was during the exercise session with Shax and Ransom doing, as our friend Yerk pointed out on Twitter, doing the exact same, not only wearing the same outfits as Troy and Crusher, but actually doing identical moves and having, a similar, like their conversation was just about other people and women, and it was just funny.
And afterwards, they channeled a bit more of Troy where they were going for Sundays because it was cheat day.
Yes, cheat day.
I mean, I think they're going somewhere. I hope they're going somewhere with Shax because there's a D story here with Shax and how he's kind of getting sick and tired of how insane
Dr. Tana
is, with just in the relationship in general and her just crazy hologram role-playing games where she's clearly unhinged. I mean, she needs to talk to Dr. Miglamo, I think.
But I laughed out loud when he said she wouldn't come out from under the bed. And then Ransom goes, did you try scratching your fingers on the covers? And going, pss, 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 pss. He's like, of course I have. Like, it was so good. But yes, I think he's starting to feel, maybe a little that things are getting crazier than he wanted them to be.
There is a wedding, apparently, this season. I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up marrying these two characters sometime this season.
Right. There is a big wedding.
So maybe they get through this thing where she goes into the Robin Hood simulator and kills Robin Hood. I mean, it's like, whoa, things get dark with her. That's for sure.
Well, she started dark. She's always been dark.
Although Boimler did have a good point. Who puts a room between two holodecks? I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
And they need thicker walls, that's for sure.
I liked Freeman's fantasy in the holodeck was that she was the president of all Starfleet.
Which isn't a thing.
Right. But that was all we got of her in this whole episode, I think.
Do we even see her? We heard her
we didn't.
Through the
that
wall.
Was my only real complaint about this episode was that I missed her.
Yeah. Ransom, as with the last episode, is I think becoming a more important character, which is kind of how, I mean, if the way a ship works, the captain's always at a kind of a higher level and most of the lower deckers deal more with the first officer anyway.
No, and he's looking out for everybody. He's looking out for Mariner. He's looking out for Shax. He was looking out for Kayshawn in the last episode. I feel like he's being a real first officer these days. But
the captain is also Mariner's mom, and we're really not getting much more of how that relationship is evolving, though we had a nice moment in episode 1 when they both agreed about the
Romulans, yeah.
Yeah, so that they're on the same wavelength. We skipped over it, but let's talk about the Romulans.
So just watching it, the one thing I noticed in the debris is that it's just ship debris.
Right. Well, yeah, before we get to that, I love just the Romulans, and like all the plots and the intrigues and the assassinations. It was so over the top, but I mean, it was, wiping off the Riemann juice.
They leave the biggest mess.
Exactly. But yes, so we're going to start working on these theory things. I've only seen 2 episodes. So we have, we did this thing on the site. One of our contributors, Ian. Hello, Ian. Ian Robertson from the UK.
Hi, Ian.
He's seen all 8. I've only seen 2.
Same.
I will be watching 3 soon. But before I do want to work with Joe, because my theory is they're not killing anyone. Is that where you're going with the?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That white beam is some kind of transporter beam.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Sucking everyone off the ships. Because
I feel like we would have seen, I don't know, uniforms, something that indicated people.
Apparently, there's only one life form. I'm going to go 90% chance it's evil Boimler or the Boimler clone working for Section 30, working for Section 31. And so that's a Section 31 ship. Maybe Badgie is with him because we know Badgie's part of the season. And the post-credit scene from season 3 finale had Badgie being captured.
Right.
Oh, this is a minor, tiny thing, but there was a fun Easter egg in the Romulan thing, which is that ship, if you've noticed, looked like a bird of prey. I'm sorry, looked like a standard Romulan warbird, but sideways, right?
Right.
There was actually Andrew Probert sketched out an idea for that, way back in early Next Gen. And, someone on Mike's team found that and said, sure, let's
Yeah,
make
I
that.
love it. I love that they do that stuff. They're doing with ships, they're doing with characters. It's so much fun. All the experimentation is great.
But yeah, it's fun. But I'm still glad that these are sidebars. These are not, this is just, this time they did it at the beginning of the episode. Last time they did it at the end of the episode. But I'm glad that they're not yet doing, tying it into our characters. I think, within a few episodes, Starfleet or, they're going to get briefed on it. Someone's going to
start hearing about it. And then, but this is fine. I'm enjoying what we got. The menage.
Exactly. a lot of menage jokes, which is back to the, main actual episodes.
Right. I like the idea that these places are constantly accidentally scooping up humans and then Starfleet has to go get them.
Well, apparently there's oddly a lot of them because this one was in the top 1,000.
Yeah.
From the quadrant or from the sector or whatever, so there's a lot of menageries. There's a lot of space zoos.
Menages.
And I guess menages with humans captured in a few of them. The most dangerous game, according to Ransom,
right?
Which was an episode where Boimler was hunted.
I feel like I've just rewatched that one recently.
The last episode was the fire hose of Voyager connections. This episode, I wouldn't call it a fire hose, but the connections were mostly back to Lower Decks itself. So when Ransom was talking about like how he's a good boss, Mariner starts throwing things back at him.
All the things he's done in previous seasons.
Right. And which are all references to different episodes. There was a lot of that with Rutherford's storyline of mentioning all these things that he's done. Of course, Boimler's box was full of little Easter eggs to Lower Decks itself. Although he did one thing, because he was talking to it, he had a Mirror Archer doll.
Yes.
And this shows you how weird I am. My first thought was, how does he know Mirror Archer ever wore that?
Yeah, so I've seen people saying that already. You are not the only one who had that thought.
I'm glad I am. Not that that's a deal killer for me in any way, but I'm just like, I'm curious. How would he know? How does anyone know? But perhaps that information came because we know that there were mirror universe incursions throughout the 24th century, all on DS9, never on TNG. So maybe Mirror Kira, revealed that fact to someone or something. Still, fun.
I loved that everywhere he went, he set up his little action figures. I thought even when he was in the Jeffries tube, he still had them set up there. Yeah. And now to add to Jeffries tube lore, we have the Tucker tube and the Billups tube.
Right, which is, I mean, that prop is a famous prop.
We've seen it a lot.
We've seen it on everything, and there was a very funny gag in Airplane 2 where Shatner was like, "What does this thing do?" You know, which was referenced by Billups. He's like, "I don't know what that thing does, but I love it." But there's a supercut on the internet of this prop, which has been in like every Trek show and other sci-fi movies. It's something you could rent out in LA and use it in your movie. So that was a very deep cut, but they gave it a name. They called it the Tucker tubes. But now it was replaced with the Billups tubes, where there's three of them. With the
third tube, and they don't even know what the third tube does, right?
So Trip Tucker gets a brief moment of glory, and then it gets taken away by Livik.
Yeah.
That guy. Hate that guy.
He's ruining everything.
Yeah, he's the worst. Actually, he's obviously a very good engineer, and but that's the thing of testing the optimism of Rutherford. Is he's like getting angry at this guy who's just a smart engineer.
Who's doing the same thing he's doing. I like that Rutherford and Boimler are still going to share quarters. That's nice. With Denty.
New Denty too.
Yeah, right? A new Denty. I'm glad there's always a Denty. But I think it's nice because we need some people sharing quarters.
Yeah, so will Mariner and Tendi do the same? Or maybe Tendi and T'Lyn. I mean, we didn't get any T'Lyn in this episode. And again, this is watching them back to back. I loved the inclusion of T'Lyn, and then suddenly we're like in a T'Lyn free zone. And as Barry Kelly said on this very podcast, T'Lyn makes every episode 10% funnier. I felt like we were missing T'Lyn, but it makes sense because you wanted to get back to that classic Rutherford Tendi dynamic in this thing, because they have such a great dynamic, but they should have given T'Lyn to have her go with Mariner. Maybe that would have been an interesting angle. There was a reason they didn't, obviously. They could have.
Yeah, I don't think they needed her in this, even though I really like her. I don't think she was needed in this one.
No.
I think that would have just been trying to come up with stuff for her to do, to fit it in. Yeah. When they had a pretty complete episode as it was.
I mean, she is just a guest star, not in the main cast. But hopefully we get a good amount with her. But, it's hard because, we don't get a lot of the bridge crew. I'm hoping we get as much of her as we do of Ransom, as opposed to someone like Steve Stevens or Miglimo.
Right.
Who are both, fun characters themselves. I assume Steve Stevens was returned from being merged
with Matt.
Matt.
And we won't get Plant Guy again, Naj, because he got Moopsied.
Yeah, that was... Again, 2 episodes got dark, because Moopsie was eating animals, but he was a nice guy running a zoo, and right before he had his, I don't know if he had bones, but whatever was sucked out of him, they were accusing him of letting Moopsie go.
Right, because they said he didn't have bones.
So his last, moment in life was having to defend himself against a false accusation, and then that horrible thing happened to him.
Yeah.
But they just put Moopsie back.
Thanks to Ransom's teeth. I know. I feel like it's so hard to review the show because you just want to describe it. Like you just sit there going, and then this happened, and that was great. So it's a tricky show to review for that reason.
Yeah, but I think when something's funny, and when you're caring about something. And this episode
does both at the same time.
Yeah, this episode definitely did that. So when it comes to I have no bones and yet I must flee, in the end, I'm just saying strong, fun, good, solid episode that was funny and, a great celebration of Lower Decks itself, but also, showed us that things are going well for season 4.
Yeah, I felt like it's getting us from one place to the next especially in terms of our characters accepting their new roles. Like now they're all promoted and they've all accepted what that is going to mean for them.
Yeah, with episode 1, when Rutherford wasn't promoted, at first I'm like, well, I don't get that. But I'm now glad that they gave Rutherford and Eugene more attention to tell his story.
Yeah.
And him getting the promotion. So that was actually one of the good things about watching this as a double feature. Is it like, oh yeah, no, that now I see why this makes sense. So that worked.
Right. And Mariner, I think, has accepted her promotion and maybe understands herself a little more, because she really did have that moment when she was talking to Ransom where she was like, oh, you know, that whole, I don't know if you've ever had a moment like this in your life where you're like, oh, I did do that. I've had many of them. So that was her moment of being like, oh yeah, I did completely sabotage myself and whatever. And so now she's learned something. Boimler's learned, you know, that moment when he goes back into the quarters that have the nacelle, the glowing, and Rutherford just goes, oh, you just got to adjust this thing. Like, he needs to, because as I'm watching, I'm like, oh, come on. You know, I know it's lower decks, so I put it in a different category, but you're like, they wouldn't really have quarters that were so horrible. And of course, yeah, no, they wouldn't. They don't. These
people work better as a team, which is what everything in this episode reinforced. Although in a way, you know, Mariner made a terrible teammate with Ensign
Gary.
See, you know, this is why I don't want to see this character again. I can't even remember his name. With Ensign Gary. And Ransom should have called her out more on that. Like, because she was supposed to be a leader helping Gary, and, you know, she was not. Gary.
But he did. It was all about the other stuff, and that's what he got to. And then she was ready to sacrifice herself, and he was like, no, just punch out all my teeth instead.
Yeah.
And then she called him Gummy at one point. She just called him Gummy.
But he got a brand new set of teeth.
Yeah, they looked a little big for his mouth.
Maybe they'll settle in or whatever.
Yeah. Well, she said, you know, the veneer had to settle. But yeah, they were very large.
So I guess that's it for 2 episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks. And, you know, we're off to a great start. Because we had 2 episodes, we're not going to do bits this week. We'll be back next Friday for the news and our review of episode 3 of season 4.
All right, we'll see you then.